Good day, everyone. Welcome to Global Government News. Today is September 4th, 2010, and I'm Darko. Welcome, everyone, to this economic news video section. And for any of those that are new listeners, please visit my website, ggnonline.com. That's ggnonline.com. This first article up is Obama says his economic policies halted, quote, the bleeding. So he stopped the bleeding. Treat for shock. Check for breathing, stop the bleeding, treat for shock. That's what we learned in the Marine Corps. It says in Washington, President Barack Obama previewing a big push on the U.S. economy next week on Saturday, defending policies that he said, quote, have stopped the bleeding and put the middle class on the road to recovery. Are you kidding me? The middle class is a goner. Sorry, guys. I don't want to be the one to tell you that, but they're a goner. Obama, I hope that they're not a goner because that's the majority of my family, but Obama struggling to bring down the 9.6% jobless rate, which is actually not really true. It's about 20% with those that are no longer receiving unemployment benefits. They're no longer counted into that rate. So there's still a lot of people that are unemployed, and it's about 20%, but they never, ever, ever, ever tell you that. But it says here, Obama struggling to bring down the 9.6% jobless rate is to spend next week talking up proposals on improving the economy, and I can pretty much bet it's going to include spending money that doesn't exist. So he hopes to gain some traction with impatient voters as they ponder whether to toss out his Democrats in a number 2 congressional elections. That's assuming that people actually believe there is a left and a right. It says, in his weekly radio and web address, Obama pointed to measures funded by the Democrats' $814 billion economic stimulus as responsible for halting the economic slide he faced when taking office in January of 2009. Said it includes spending on roads and bridges and money given to local governments to avert layoffs of teachers, firefighters, and police officers. The steps we have taken to date have stopped the bleeding, Obama said, but strengthening our economy means more than that. I mean, spending more money. So I have a lot of articles to cover, and there's no way I'm going to be able to cover each one in depth. So I'm going to post the links, and you guys are going to have to check most of them out. If there's anyone in particular you like, just go in there and check it out. But this next one up is, can the president boost jobs in the economy between now and election? Well, if you're a free market advocate, you would say, well, the president has diddly squat to do with creating jobs or the economy. You leave that up to the market. But just like they did, or just like he just said, he stopped the bleeding, that is straight out of what Keynesian would say, or some people pronounce that differently, but it's a version of, you either have Austrian economics, which is more free market, but it still kind of has government, and then you have the Keynesian model, which depends on government intervention, because they basically assume that the market will not supply and cannot be trusted. So that's why you'd have a bunch of mumbo jumbo such as this. Can the president boost jobs in the economy between now and election? And then what does that say? It's like, well, if he could, why didn't he do it in the first place? Why would he do it just for the elections? Well, that's because it's all a mafia-run system. This is for stocks. September starts on an upbeat note. So if you're turning on the news today, you're going to get blanketed by the propaganda that's going to tell you everything's okay, the recovery's back, and we're on our feet again, right? It says stocks could start next week with investors feeling a bit more optimistic about the economy thanks to a stronger than expected jobs report, making further market gains more likely. The government's non-farm payrolls report on Friday was the latest of the week's data to suggest the economy may not be headed for another severe downturn as many investors have feared. And so they've been saying, are we heading into a double dip recession? Well, we were heading towards another depression. We've been in a recession. And this is from the Business Insider. It says bankrupt Miami in fiscal emergency, breaks employee contracts, hikes property tax. I meant to cover this, but I ran out of time. August 31st, Miami's bankrupt. Unfortunately, the city refuses to admit it in an enormously foolhardily attempt to make ends meet in spite of the fact that Miami home prices have been hammered and 1 in 8 are unemployed. The county keeps pouring in the painful tax and fee increases. Moving on, it says, bonds slip as data signal recovery and less jeopardy. U.S. Treasury prices fell for a third straight day on Friday as data of the U.S. labor market alleviated fears the world's largest economy may be headed for a double-dip recession. You like that? I just tell it how it is, man. And you read this, and you can see how they skew stuff. And it says, dollar falls versus euro, higher yielding currencies. The U.S. dollar fell against most foreign currencies on Friday after a surprisingly strong non-farm payroll report eased worries about the outlook for the economy and boosted appetite for riskier assets. So the next one is White House. No second stimulus being considered. Well, I didn't even know it was even on the table, but I've mentioned it in most of the economic news when it comes up about another stimulus coming eventually. And I just talked about how we have a non-free market, a Keynesian market, a corporatist market, or a fascist market, whatever term you prefer. But it's basically when the government has to step in and not allow the free market to right itself, to adjust itself. Because if it did, there would be bleeding. So the next one up is, throw this on the Labor Day grill, tax cuts for small businesses. Says this Labor Day weekend, the job outlook appears about as inviting as leftover potato salad, but President Obama found encouragement Friday in the jobs report up for August, despite an uptick in the unemployment rate to 9.6% and an overall loss of 54,000 jobs. Goodbye census workers. The private sector actually created 67,000 jobs last month. That's considerably more than economists expected, and the 8th month private sector increases. Says jobs are being created. They're not just being created as fast as they need to be, Mr. Obama said. No argument there. Indeed, it will take 125,000 new jobs a month just to match the growth in the number of available workers. Says the president will lay out some ideas on the next week, including reportedly tax relief for small businesses, which drive job growth. The tax cuts would represent a move away from the White House strategy of stimulus spending for government-created jobs, and it's robbing Peter to pay for Paul and bribing, basically. They're going to get these tax cuts from expired tax cuts on the wealthy, and then they're going to give them to small businesses. And it says, oh yeah, and the wealthy are usually the small businesses, right? The millionaires. They call them wealthy. Well, they're millionaires. Yeah, they're wealthy, but they're not rich. And so basically, I would assume that would be the same people, but maybe I'm wrong. And in here, if anybody thinks that I don't know what I'm talking about, it says, to date, the administration and Congress have followed mostly Keynesian principles that prescribe pumping in government money when the economy needs resuscitating. Remember? Start the breathing, stop the bleeding, and treat for shock. Obama to link tax plan hiring, it says here, with the job market stuck in neutral, the Obama administration is moving towards using the revenue from expiring tax cuts for the wealthy to finance about $35 billion of tax cuts for small businesses and workers. All right, moving on, it says more than 400 U.S. banks will fail, Roubini, even if the U.S. and European economies manage to avoid a double dip. Man, dude. It will still feel like a recession, while more than, that's because we are in one, but I already said that, but I just feel like I'm going insane here reading these. It says while more than half of the 800 plus U.S. banks on the critical list are likely to go bust, according to renowned economist Roubini of Roubini Global Economics, said the second half of the year will remain weak as tailwinds become headwinds, Roubini told CNBC. And it says, in the second half, fiscal policy becomes a headwind. No more cash for clunkers. The positive scenario is that growth will be below par. The next one up is government policy caused American unemployment crisis. It says the unemployment rate has risen again for the first time in 4 months. I predicted a growing long-term unemployment problem last year. Indeed, after the government plays with the numbers to make them look better using inaccurate birth-death models and other tricks of the trade. They're talking about the jobless benefits not being counted with unemployment once they're no longer receiving the benefits. This is how the current jobs downturn compares with other post-World War II recessions. And so you can check that out. The link will be posted. And it says the next one, job gains providing a ray of false hope. And this is from the same website, zerohedge.com. And basically goes into a bunch of different history about how they've actually messed with the numbers. So moving on, U.S. unemployment rises to 9.6%. U.S. Labor Department figures show the world's biggest economy is still battling the recent recession, as its unemployment rate has increased to 9.6% in August. And I read down here, it says, according to the latest figures, the U.S. economy has shed another 54,000 jobs in August, resulting in a 0.1% rise in unemployment since the previous month. However, Wall Street sees the news as surprisingly good, since economists had initially predicted an estimated loss of 120,000 jobs. See how they word that? Says, moving on to the Huffington Post, poll, unemployment affects 3 out of 4 Americans. Did I read that right? Nearly 3 out of 4 Americans have been directly affected by the recession, either because they have been unemployed or know someone who has lost their job. This is true because I was just talking about that. Like my sister, she's been unemployed for over a year now, but her husband works, and then someone else who their wife is unemployed, but he's working, and so with the 1 out of 4 people unemployed, there's a good chance that everyone that a good number of people are going to be unemployed. And it cuts down the household income by half. It says, Obama needs your 401k to balance his budget. The Obama administration is taking the first steps to confiscate retirement dollars, according to Dr. Jerome Corsi, who predicts that the end result will be retirees with 401k plans holding near worthless government debt that will be paid off in a devalued currency worth pennies on the dollar. That's right. It's what is it? You pay for the present by stealing from the future. Says EU austerity policies risk civil war in Greece, warns top German economist Dr. Sin. Says Greece's austerity measures cannot prevent default and will lead to a breakdown of the political order if continued for long, a leading German economist has warned. Moving on. Karzai, this is in Afghanistan. They're having a bank runs. Karzai urges Afghans not to panic as bank withdrawals accelerate. As depositors throng branches of Afghanistan's biggest bank, President Karzai told Afghans on Thursday not to panic shortly after his brother, a major shareholder in the beleaguered Kabul bank, called for intervention by the U.S. to head off a financial meltdown. So then what do you got? Oh, bailout in the works for the Afghan bank as panic continues. In a bid to fend off the threat of a nationwide financial crisis, the Afghan government scrambled to come up with the funds to bail out Afghanistan's largest bank on Saturday after lines of frantic depositors mobbed the bank for a third day. Said the details of the deal were still being worked out on Saturday by the Central Bank of Afghanistan with technical assistance from the United States Treasury Department, Afghan-American officials said. But American officials said no U.S. funds were involved in the bailout. So traditional, shady dealings. Moving on, we have IMF warns over UK debt and call for global fiscal reform. The IMF has warned that long-term fiscal reforms will be required among advanced economies as it's projected the UK's gross debt to gross GDP, or product, would rise to 90.6% in 2015. The next one is this year, U.S. public debt could reach endgame. Says for at least 4 years, Asia News has sounded the alarm bells against the risk due to the huge size reached by speculative finance. In 2008, we said that the attempt to save the U.S. banks could push the U.S. beyond the point of solvency, which most banks aren't even solvent to begin with because they don't have enough money on hand. U.S. debt approaches insolvency. Just moving on, check these out if you really care about this particular article. It says U.S. auto sales may hit 28-year low as discounts flop. It says U.S. auto sales in August probably were the slowest for the month in 28 years as model year closeouts deals failed to entice consumers, concerned the economy is worsening and that they may lose their jobs. It says high-speed courts try to rush through foreclosure. And we're going to finish up here, just blitzing through all these articles. It says construction spending in the U.S. fell twice as much as forecast. The next one is after bargains of recession, airfares soar. It says fears grow over global food supply. Try to get in that article, but it's Financial Times. You have to have a subscription. UN to hold meeting on rising food prices. It says corn prices hit 23-month high. Then it says up to 90% of oysters dead in DMR's reef sample. It says The economy is the number on your paycheck, not the stock market's ups and downs. Next one is Luke Oil will pump Iraq oil in 2013. That's the Russians. China's exports to Iran crossed $5 billion mark, and taxpayers spend millions paying for trade.